Mandisa Thomas is a native of New York City who now lives in Atlanta, and she is the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers, Inc. Black Nonbelievers is a 501c3 nonprofit that she founded as a volunteer in 2011, dedicated to connecting Black nonbelievers and allies who are living free from religion to provide secular fellowship, reduce stigma, support nonbelievers in coming out, and which celebrates racial diversity in our movement. Black Nonbelievers' motto is walking by sight, not by faith. You may have caught Mandisa on CBS Sunday Morning, CNN.com, JET magazine, or on the cover of the Humanist magazine with 4 other fierce Black women freethinkers. She was featured in Jeremiah Kamara's film Contradiction, which we did show at a previous convention, and she has served on many diverse secular boards. Some other groups have beat us to recognizing Mandy, and they include the Secular Student Alliance, and by the way, Kevin Bowling, who is the executive director of the Secular Student Alliance, is here today. And they gave Mandisa its Backbone Award this year, and the Unitarian Universalist Humanist Association named her Person of the Year last year. When a group of us representing various secular organizations lobbied together in Congress last February, members of Congress were almost uniformly most interested in hearing from Mandisa about a highly overlooked constituency, Black nonbelievers. 2 weeks ago, Mandisa, with help from some other activists, put on the historic Women of Color Beyond Belief conference meeting in Chicago, of which FFRF is proud to have been a sponsor, and Dan and I were there with some other staff. Like so many innovators and activists, Mandisa Thomas saw an important need going unfilled, and she didn't wait for someone else to fill it and do the work. She stepped up to the plate to meet that need and create Black Nonbelievers, which performs a vital service, not just for Black nonbelievers, but for the free-thinking community. It's my pleasure to introduce the Freedom from Religion Foundation's 2019 Freethought Heroine.
I'm a hugger, just in case you didn't know. Thank you, Annie, LAURIE, and thank you, Dan, and thank you to the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and thank you to all of you for being here today. Annie, LAURIE did a very good job of making an introduction, so I won't say anything else, at least about that. But it's a very interesting thing for me to be considered a heroine, because I am simply an organizer with a background and expertise in hospitality and event management with a heavy secular influence and a proud, very, very proud Black woman who definitely saw a need that wasn't being fulfilled in this movement. I want to take some time to acknowledge some of the influences in my life. One who was my grandmother, Ethel Mae Welch. You may have seen me talk about her when I was on Freethought Matters. Also, one of my other heroines, Ida B. Wells. Also, Jeremiah Kamara, who I met in 2010, and I was just inspired by what I saw when I fully decided to re-identify as an atheist, and when I became more involved with the community. I just said there was a need to be filled, and just like nothing fails like prayer, nothing fails like just sitting back and waiting for something to be done. But as I acknowledge those who came before me, those who work with me, and those who will eventually come after me, it is nice to bask in this moment. And so thank you once again for this. What's fun for me is to say, nope, all right. So if you can't see that, in addition to the other media outlets that was mentioned, it's fun to say, yes, I was in Playboy. So for the 2018 American Atheist Convention, there was a former pastor turned writer who was doing an article for Playboy covering that convention. And there is a quote from that article which says, "The most encouraging moment of the American Atheist Convention weekend comes when I introduce myself to Mandisa Thomas. And I find that I'm in very good company with being in Playboy, because it was in the 1960s that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, in an interview in Playboy magazine, endorsed state and church separation." If you didn't already know, the stronghold of religion in the Black community is something that we are very much contending with. You would have seen that in Jeremiah's work. So I'm not going to prolong that point, because hopefully everyone in here is getting it. And I've been monitoring engagement and interactions even in this room, because we often bemoan the lack of diversity in spaces like this. But in starting Black Nonbelievers, we have been about overturning the stronghold of religion within the Black community, as well as the dependence on the savior mentality. This idea that this God is going to come and save our community from the atrocities that have been committed, all the while overlooking the fact that if this God existed, he was responsible for it in the first place. But we knew that there were more of us out here. We knew there were more Black folks who were sitting in churches. They didn't believe anymore, but they thought they were the only ones. That is often a very common saying that we encounter. And we just knew that it was needed in order to bridge those gaps within the high religiosity of the Black community, as well as the still lack of representation within the secular community. A bridge needed to be built, and simply because it was needed. So, who here is familiar with this building? Everyone here should be, but if you aren't, it is the new Smithsonian's National Museum of African American Culture, and I'm going to get into why that is significant in just a moment. So, Black Nonbelievers as an organization is now 8 years strong and counting. And our mission is to build the community, and increase the visibility and support for Black folks who either identify fully as atheist or who are questioning religion in favor of believing, and also encouraging an evidence-based approach to life. And that is important whether you believe or not. And that it is important to show that, yes, there is just more than one or a few Black atheists out there. Again, we had to build up this community and network in order for us to really get it. It was going to take for us to do it. And we host a number of events. We are almost day in and day out with engagement of other Black atheists, as well as all kinds of atheists. And so we celebrated our 5th anniversary in 2016. We are coming up on our 10th anniversary in 2021, so I hope you will stay tuned for that. We have featured, thank you. That work has also led to not only more Black folks, Black atheists, secularists, humanists, etc., coming out to various events, that has also led us to contributing to research as well as literary projects such as what you see here. The American Humanist Association's article covered, a magazine that LAURIE mentioned, was the first time that there have been Black women multiple Black women simultaneously featured on any secular magazine's cover. Simultaneously. I think they featured Alice Walker previously, and I know American Atheist has featured Dr. Anthony Penn. But it is also because these are must-haves for your collection. This is a room that this is a group here that values literary work, books, etc. If you aren't familiar with any of these books here, whether it is or works here, which is Jeremiah Kamara's Contradiction, the Humanist magazine, the new anthology of Black freethinkers by Dr. Chris Cameron, the Ebony Exodus Project by Candace Gorham, which is an anthology on Black women leaving religion. Dr. Anthony Penn's When Colorblindness Isn't the Answer. And there is a full amount of works that are coming from the Black atheist demographic, and it was up to us to help facilitate it. Why? Because it was needed. Now, will everyone make it? Yeah, I had to say that. Wow, this thing is fast. Will everyone make it? As much as we would like, ideally, we would hope that everyone who comes out as an atheist would be as rational and as objective, even while they're trying to overcome their religious beliefs. However, I have had to tell quite a few people in my years of activism this. And the reason for that is simply because some people aren't ready. And that's okay. That's a part of managing our spaces and also managing the people, which is very important. We have to consider that even in our secular spaces, even when we are engaging people who are leaving these ideals behind. They do come with a lot of baggage, and we try to help as much as possible, but I personally am not a licensed counselor, so I can't put but so much on my plate, nor will I already am still a volunteer in this movement. I come from a demographic that is already overworked and undercredited, which is Black women. And even in this community where there is more attention paid to people of color as far as membership, and there is a genuine interest when it comes to leadership, when it comes to financial support, that is still very lacking. And for myself as a Black atheist mother, wife, someone who is pansexual and sex positive and unapologetic, I am not seen as a heroine, but as a threat. And sadly, that comes from within our own movement. But it is, you know what, even through the pitfalls and through the other things that we deal with, it has been important to keep going because it's needed. Now, going back to history in the making, I have a phone call this coming week from one of the directors at the Smithsonian Museum of African American Culture through facilitating a project with him last year about Black millennials leaving religion. We are now in the preliminary stages of collecting archives of Bean's work. This is significant because there is a possibility that we will end up in this museum in the very near future. So we are making history, and it must be understood that Black secular history and the activism that we are doing now is important not just to the Black community, but is important to American history and in this United States and the world as we know it. So we are doing some serious work. And the growth of a movement, especially one rooted in critical thinking and free thought, will depend on the acknowledgement and support for institutionally marginalized demographics, which means taking diversity and inclusion efforts and how you treat people of color when they enter these spaces seriously. There is no getting around that. So I just want to announce that, Annie LaURIE mentioned Women of Color Beyond Belief. It is coming back to Chicago next year. These are the dates, September 25th through the 27th. At the same location, you may find more information at wocbeyondbelief.com. What was so important about that event? It was very monumental because it showed that we're accomplishing what other organizations are still trying to figure out and do, which is how to bring out more people of color. And I promise you that we welcome you to attend our events so that you can actually see how many people of color are involved in this movement, especially Black women. There are a number of us involved. However, just because you don't see them here for reasons. But I also want to thank you for your support. And you may follow us on social media. There's where you can find us. But the most important lesson that we can take here is to put your money where your mouth is. So to the person I spoke with earlier this morning, you don't get a pat on the back for joining the NAACP. You don't get a pat on the back for saying, hey, I have this Black person as a friend, or I know this person. But you do get our sincere thanks. And you do show that you are serious when you consistently support our efforts just as much as you support a Freedom from Religion Foundation. Because as much progress, especially as they are making, which we acknowledge, and we appreciate FFRF for being one of our most valued supporters, it also takes the people involved in these organizations to see the importance, even if it doesn't directly apply to you, in some way it really does. I promise you that. And really, again, all of us, it's going to take for all of us, if we truly care about the marginalized, the further marginalized people in this movement, that if you say you need our voices, you say you need our leadership, organizations like ours, which I will reiterate, is a 501c3 organization. So donations and contributions to us are tax deductible. Our meetings and our events are open to everyone. It's going to take deconstructing and reevaluating these notions that you have about Black and brown folks and other people of color, and especially women, in order for us to really move forward, because once again, it is needed. Thank you. So I think there's time for questions. Are there any questions? No? Okay. Yeah, can we step to the microphone? Yes.
So, hey, Matthew from Raleigh, North Carolina, Triangle Freethought. Do you have yourself or anyone in the organization who travels to do talking? Because we have useful way to get people in is if someone they recognize is there to speak.
Yes, so
Candace is speaking for us tomorrow, Monday, but someone who's active in your organization.
Yes, I have referrals to many organizers and activists who would be willing to come to, to speak to various local groups. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Chris Cameron, whose book I featured, is on a tour now. So you might want to. I can help facilitate connecting him to you all so that y'all can have him featured as a speaker. That is the one thing that I pride myself on doing, is connecting the folks who need it and the folks who are doing the work to the broader movement. So yes, absolutely. Yes.
Hi, Mary from Milwaukee. Could you please speak a little bit more about how Ida B. Wells was a role model for you?
Yes, so for those of you who aren't familiar with Ida B. Wells, she was a journalist. She was an anti-lynching crusade journalist, she's an activist, former slave who became a teacher at Rust College at the age of 14 years old. Yes. And she started campaigning for anti-lynching, especially on the basis of the rape of white women, which there were many Black men who were being lynched for that, for having consensual sex with white women. But of course, that was seen as rape, or if someone got caught, the men were accused of rape. Or even if you spoke up against injustice, that was grounds for lynching. And so she worked for a number of news outlets until she was forced to go to Chicago after her news office was trashed in Memphis. And so she was also one of the preliminary founders of the NAACP. And she was considered very much a troublemaker, very much outspoken at a time where it was very, very dangerous for Black women in particular to do so. So yes, that is why she's one of my heroines.
Do you know if she was a free thinker?
No, she was religious.
Okay.
You know, she was religious, but again, you don't have to necessarily be a freethinker or a non-believer to be an influence. Because again, and also one other interesting fact about her, she challenged Jim Crow laws when she was thrown off of a train. She purchased a first-class seat, and she was thrown out of her car for refusing to give up her seat. So she took the rail company to court, and she initially won her case. It was overturned, but she was one of the first people to challenge the Jim Crow laws in court.
Thank you.
Yes.
Carolyn from Alliance, Ohio.
Hello.
Pardon me, were you raised in the church, and at what age did you become a freethinker?
So, as I said in the beginning, I was raised very secular. I wasn't raised religious at all. However, as a classically trained singer, I had a voice teacher, a voice instructor, who would take me to various churches in the New York City area to sing. So I was a soloist in many churches. And the first time I said I was an atheist was when I was 14, because I was very, very outspoken, having learned a lot about Black history and culture, as well as institutional racism and injustice. I was very, very outspoken as a person. And so someone in my high school asked me, was I atheist? And I asked, what did that mean? And I was told that I didn't believe in heaven or hell. And so I thought to myself, well, over the years, that probably sounds, that sounds about right, because every time I thought about the concept of dying in heaven or hell, I could never reconcile it because there wasn't any proof. So, I did, after a while, I started saying that I was spiritual but not religious, which didn't really make sense anyway. But yes, I am very much a full product of the Black community, and yes, I was raised non-religious. So we're unicorns within unicorns, it seems. But there are definitely more of us out here. Yes.
Hi, my name is Janet. I'm from here in Madison, and we have a nice book festival going on this weekend, too. So I went over to hear Donna Brazil talk about her book.
Okay.
She was great. She happened to mention her faith as she was talking. Mm-hmm. And so I got up and said, I'm over at this convention. And you'd all be pleased to know a lot of people were like, yay. They were pretty supportive. And I asked the question about the Establishment Clause and could she speak to how important it is that we not have religion in government. Mm-hmm. She totally sidestepped it, made a 5-minute speech about her faith and how important it was, mm-hmm. and how everybody should be able to believe what they want to believe, fine, but totally missed the government part. Right. Would you like to speak to there being a Department of Religion in the White House? That's not what it's called. The Office of Religion, I think, or...
Well, technically, Donna is right. Everyone should be able to believe what they want.
And we all think that, too.
And I'm not going to use this as an opportunity to just completely denigrate another Black woman. And it must be understood that again, this is a part of the tradition in the Black community, that this is what we're fighting against as an organization, plus just in this environment, or just in this country. So, of course, I don't agree with any office of religion as it pertains to infusing it into government. We heavily endorse state and church separation, and it's gonna take for us to keep speaking up and also refer her or ask her about some of the freethinkers or Black freethinkers and humanists and atheists that she may not be aware of. So there's, instead of just challenging it directly, because that's kind of a catch-22, many of them will sidestep that question because that's kind of what they're used to doing. And if it makes her uncomfortable, that's kind of okay. But it's good to continue to point her and others like her in the direction of other Black folks who are non-religious and even atheists, because that is what it may take for them to really turn this around. Again, it does make a difference who is being represented. And for people of color or marginalized groups, it will help for them to see another Black atheist woman, for them to say, oh, okay, because it's expected for white people. It is expected.
I was planning to write her. I'll look that up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Holly from Madison.
Hello.
And having just listened to and watched the Holy Hierarchy, which was totally powerful for me, I was missing women's perspective, African American women's perspective, just in that whole large process. And I wondered if you would share some of your own thoughts about that film.
I personally like the film. I love Jeremiah Kamara. If you haven't seen Contradiction, you might want to. You may see a familiar face in it. Hint, hint. I think it might be better to ask him about what his thought process was, and perhaps having him include more Black women's perspectives in that particular, in that particular film or in that particular subject matter. I think there was something that he wanted to get across, which I think maybe the people that he chose may have had more of a clinical or even a more formally educated perspective on. Not to say that we don't, but it could have been, sometimes as much as we try to think of everything, sometimes we can't. So I think it might be good to ask him about that, but it's certainly that he has never considered Black women's perspectives, because he has. So perhaps for his next feature, y'all might want to let him know, you might want to get some more Black women up in there. Yes, thank you once again. Thank you to FFRF. Much appreciated.